Soup. Hey everyone, welcome to Telliot Brainstorm. Yeah, so this is going to be super casual as far as what we're talking about, but it can be as technical or non-technical as we want to make it. First, I'm going to go over kind of the overall goals and what we're trying to build on the timeline, and then we can kind of talk about specific details and how we get there going forward. So as everyone knows, this is the build that we're doing. So we have current Telliot, which is like our mining software, and we run that for current Tellor. And we want to build something for Telliot X. So we're going to be changing up the Tellor system. So Telliot probably needs to change as well. So we're going to be focused on how can we sort of make it fit with the new Tellor system, and that's kind of the goal of the build. And so as far as timelines go for this, we're sending Telliot X off for an audit this week. The current, like the target date would be like late October, November sometime for launching Telliot X. So we would need this to be done before that. Probably we'll be spending September getting like an initial implementation up, and then all of October testing it on Rinkeby. That's going to be the idea probably. Don't think it should be too hard. I think, like we have several implementations that could probably work on it in a day or two with some tweaks. But we want to make it sort of better than that. So looking back, so I know some of you guys have all worked on Telliot or have used Telliot in the past, like the big things that we want to sort of address whenever rebuilding it. So like if we could go back and rebuild Telliot or rebuild how everything sort of worked, what would we do differently would be the question. So like I identified a few, but feel free to kind of chime in. The first piece is more or less crypto related. And it's that we're running into some issues in that I'm sure most of you saw the Geth bug that recently happened. And it affected a lot of Ethereum nodes. And that's because almost everyone's running one client on Ethereum. That leads to some issues whenever everyone is just running one client, because then if there's a bug, everybody gets broken at the exact same time. We don't want that to happen with Tellor. So like, if everyone is running the exact same Telliot or the exact same client, if that client breaks, the entire system goes down, or, tons of like, it could potentially lead to, nobody's catching the errors, or we're all submitting the same bad values and not catching it. You want to have competing clients, and we're going to have to work on how do we build that, whether it's grant funding. So like, I know Ethereum, they grant funded like 9 different clients for ETH2. Whether or not that actually works, they sort of completely failed at the multiple clients on each one. So maybe don't give them too much credit, but, we could maybe work through grants to give funding to other teams. We could build a few different ones ourselves. A lot of different ways, but so like, how do we do, I'll just put like multiple clients up here, because that, as far as that goes, most people are running, we sort of have multiple clients now with Telliot, because like it seems like we have like our public one, and then probably the other people are just like sort of looking at that as a reference implementation, and then they have their own forks. So it's like sort of okay, but then at the same time, you want some more things like open and you can compare and how it's all working. The next big thing, which this sort of a little bit goes into it, is testing. So Telliot moved really, really fast, and we like sort of built Telliot without tests from like day one. So it was like my fault as much, probably more so than anyone else's. Like, we just never, like testing Telliot was like testing in production, from day one. We want to make that better. We want to have it cleanly tested and everything. So that way, hopefully this, if you have tons of multiple clients and tons of clean tests, you shouldn't have bugs, or you shouldn't have as many sort of detrimental bugs to the entire Tellor system. If that makes sense. And going into testing in multiple clients, the other thing we have to think about when we're sort of making Telliot is open source and community. So there's a lot of issues when it comes to building Telliot, because Tellor in itself is sort of a competitive game. If you can gain some slight advantage, you can make a whole lot of money off of other people. So what it leads to is that people try and exploit bugs in the Tellor system, like we saw last month, or people try and, if they find a way to sort of make things better, like this was, the GPU game, and like, did somebody build a GPU? Did somebody build an FPGA? You never share it. Like you keep it in-house, and everything is super closed source. That's not really the ethos or the feeling that we want in our community. Whenever everything's really closed source, what happens is that you get, like, obviously what you get now. So you had the first person to create GPUs just dominated and became like 90%. Then the first person to make a pool dominated and took all of the hash power and all of the rewards. Then the first person to create FPGAs took all of the hash power and got all of the rewards. And so you just go from like almost like centralized ownership of the system to centralized ownership, and whoever has like the magic key at the moment is the one that's winning. And that's not what you want. That's obviously a bad thing. So, how do we foster an open source community? How do we foster open development? I think some of the pieces, Golang proved, we were using Golang. It proved to be a little bit of a limiting factor, I'd say. That's why a lot of, now we're starting to switch over a little bit to Python. Hopefully that can help move some things. Maybe we have a Golang client as well. But just making it, when we're writing the code and when we're writing the structure and everything, it should be targeted towards making it easy to understand so people can contribute. If you can have a developer who is relatively new to the space come on and make some meaningful improvements, or tweak it and add some tests, that's really powerful. Whereas if you have a 2-month learning curve before you understand how the system works, you're just not going to get any open source developers. Okay, and then the last thing that I had identified was specs. We sort of failed with the last Telliot. We're starting. We did this a little bit last month, and we're continuing. But we want to have everything cleanly spec'd out. What are the data IDs? What do they mean in writing? Kind of going up. So all of the multiple implementations, they all follow the specs about what good data is, and what, this is what it should do, and this is what it should pass forward. This is how it should work. These are what's valid. And so this is going to be a job for, spuddy or even non-technical people who are not even going to do the coding. Like, this is, you don't have to be doing the coding to write the specs. We just need to make sure that that's really clean. We had sort of just been throwing the data in the code, and then without even specking, like the code was the specs before, which was like, sort of shouldn't have been that way from day one. So anything else, any other lessons we've learned from Telliot that we think we can pass forward? No? Okay. That's my, like, those are what I want you guys to think about whenever we're coming up with how to do it. Just think through where we're going. And now we're going to use, I was thinking we could do like a design thing. So like we go from a user perspective on Telliot, and we almost take it like, Mike, you'll have to walk me through how to actually do this. We can, because we're building Telliot for the Tellor system, but there's, it's ultimately people using it. So I was trying to think like, who are we building this for? Who are we trying, you know, obviously we could be building it for ourselves and we can just reap all the rewards and keep it secret, but we're not going to do that, guys. We as a team should not be like, you know, like the team ourselves should not be the ones profiting off of it. It should be actual users. So with Tellor X, it's going to be, we've lowered the barrier to entry from 500 TRB down to 100 TRB, and we completely wiped the need for any sort of hash power. And what we also did is gas costs are cut in half. So we did the calculation. The new submit value is about 1/10 of the gas cost. So it's awesome. You know, everyone should be super excited about that. The downside to Tellor X though, if you only stake one miner, you can only submit once every 12 hours. So it could be a boring process for you if your system does something once every 12 hours, and it's probably going to increase, to be honest. You know, if we get a whole bunch of people on there, it could shoot up to a day pretty quick, even longer. So I see there being multiple users. Mike and I were talking about this a little bit. So there's going to be the first user, which is the power user. Can you guys sort of read this, I guess?
Yeah,
that's perfect.
Okay, so the power user is going to be like,
when you say users, is that like reporters, people that submit values?
Yeah, so who are the reporters going to be? Who are the users of Telliot going to be? It's going to be the reporters. The first kind of reporter, I think, is going to be the power. I call them the power user. This is like Hashpool or, you know, Leo or Keyword or one of those guys who's currently in. They have 4,000 TRB staked. They're probably going to keep 4,000 TRB staked and just have 40 miners. They're going to be able to submit whenever they want. They're going to want to paste 40 keys in this thing, and yeah, they're probably going to want to, you know. So I would say this person is technical. You can use command line. They can help. They're going to want to submit for every ID.
Are they developers or no?
Yeah, I mean they're familiar enough. They're probably going to be running forks.
Okay.
So because this is going to be the person that just wants to really reap as much profits as possible out of this thing.
And know how to do it.
Yeah.
I was going to say, these Telliot users are the ones that are always going to be looking for an edge too. So if there's any kind of weird submissions happening, it's usually going to be this crowd.
Yeah, but this crowd is also the people that are going to be monitoring the whole system to dispute everyone. You know, they're really useful in a lot of ways too. They're the people that are going to keep the system churning no matter what, because they want the profit. So that's kind of the first user. You know, I even threw in the word like MEV in here. So like they're the users like that might want to have, you know, minor extractable value, and they can do things like that to sort of get an edge. They can use like gas tokens and pieces like that. Just, you know, they use smart contracts within their code, like as a separate layer. So they're going to be, we want to build it for them, but at the same time, like, you know, who else are we building it for? So the other person that I recommend, or that we identified, is like the casual user. So you just need 100 TRB to stake, and you can report. You can be a data reporter. You can download Telliot and you can submit for some IDs. The new thing about Tellor X is you don't have to submit for every ID. There's probably going to be some IDs that fit the power user better. So like, you know, ETH US dollar, BTC US dollar, those are, you can pull from 10 APIs, medianize it and submit it on chain. It's pretty straightforward. There might be some IDs that are more manual, like the manual data one. You could have a casual user who just has 100 CRV staked. They could go to Tellor scan, type in the value manually and click submit value. it could be, they could do everything on a point and click website. If it's once a day that they're allowed to submit. They might not even need a Telliot system. They might want to run a Telliot system, something, you know, you would want it to be, but this is different. They're probably not as technical. So this would be like, you know, somebody who I could see this would be like a Spuddy, or you know, we've had a bunch of those people do the competition. They want to get involved and they want to do something with Tellor, but they're not going to go in and code up their own fork of the Telliot. They're gonna want to run a binary and then submit, and then they'll be good at following instructions. And this person we want. These are the good community members. These are the people that you actually want in your community, because they're going to vote on things. They're going to pay attention. They usually fit with our values and ideals, and they want to run this because they want to be part of the system. They're not doing it to make, you know, $100,000 a month so they can, you know, do that. They're making a few $100s extra a month on the side of their day job.
This is the group that I hope will grow. This is the group I'm trying to reach.
Yeah. These are people that you're going to have a subset that are going to be very, you know, not technical as well. You're going to have people that, like, I like to think, Spuddy, you've gotten pretty technical, at least with mining. But there's going to be people like that have 100 TRB that really need a lot of hand holding, and maybe are just long-term holders that aren't traders either. So they're not comfortable trading. They're not comfortable in a command line, but they're going to have a TRB long-term. They might as well have this thing running every 12 hours.
But yet, to be able to actually submit data to an Oracle on Ethereum, it's a really, really cool thing to do.
Yes.
And I think we can tell that to people. You know, it's kind of like a marketing angle where you can say, you know, you can be a Tellor reporter and you can submit data to this Oracle, and it's completely open. That makes it different from other Oracles, and this is a good thing.
And it makes them different. They can wear that as a badge of honor, being able to be one of the few people that are participating in the blockchain ecosystem, if you will, in a very unique and rare way.
And it's more than just staking tokens in a wallet somewhere.
Yes.
Like just running a wallet and staking tokens, it's different.
Yeah, and there's, to some people, that'll be very, very novel and very, very cool for them, just to say that they do that and get rewarded for it.
We'll give away t-shirts.
Yes.
We're already working on designs.
Yes.
So.
I submitted data once every 12 hours for 3 months, and all I got was this lousy t-shirt.
It's a great shirt.
Well, I'm thinking a lot of this, like the one thing that we also might want to make for more of the casual user are pools again.
Yes.
So, you know, the once every 12 hours or, you know, even longer, it's probably not enough to entice them. But, you know, there should be a really easy way for Telliot X to work, as far as you can, you know, you have somebody like Spuddy running a pool where you stake your TRB and he gives you a stake in his pool that he runs.
People don't expect to make a ton of money from this kind of thing either. Just making like if they got one tribute like a week, like if you got one tribute a week being a reporter, that's amazing. Because you can use it, you can just run an extra computer in your house and do it, or run a cloud compute instance or something.
It mitigates some amount of holding risk, and they were going to be holding anyway, most likely.
Yeah, so that, you know, we have to work on how to design Telliot to maybe work with pools, maybe work more seamlessly in that, you know, you can have multiple keys, you can have multiple, I'm sure pool would probably be a smart contract somewhere that we could build. But these are some things that we want to make sure that we think about how to do and point people in the right direction. Because, yeah, going back to the failures of Telliot, like we had some Tellor pools, but since everything became really closed source, like there were people who like, listen, I want to stake and give money to people to be reporters, but nobody was accepting new people. They're like, I'll just buy Tellor myself and stake it, you know, rather than sharing it with the pool. So how we sort of foster that good kind of environment is
and pools is probably a good way to build up community as well.
Yep.
Where do we anticipate a casual user will run Telliot in terms of which, like, what compute environment, if that makes sense? Like a cloud computer or their own computer?
It'll
or-
be their own computer. We have
Yeah,
to assume
that's what I
that.
think too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
the easiest way to run Telliot is like just on an extra computer running in your house that you can actually see the operating system screen. Like you don't have to do everything in command line where you can
Right.
see like the Ubuntu OS and use that.
But since it doesn't take a significant amount of compute resources, like why not design it for like the same computer that you would use for everyday tasks, I guess.
Yeah, you could.
I mean, at least for me, like I'm even a dev and I don't have an extra computer. And I don't think many people do.
Well, you're also young. Just wait until you have older computers that you.
Yeah.
That's what I use my old computers as like nodes and things.
They can actually computer a year.
Yeah, so we have lots of mining nodes.
You need an extra computer, just ask him. He's got a couple.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you could do both. I think Sean
Yeah.
was just saying, like ideally you'd have like, your spare computer just dedicated to doing this.
Well, and that's like, so you can even, and that's why like there's going to be a lot of different ways that you can set up Telliot. So this goes into kind of the last person who I see that actually is going to use it. And this is going to be projects. So like Liquidity, Ample, the people who are
Our Tellor users.
Tellor users. What are they going to want to do? They're going to want to monitor. So let's say it's Liquidity, ETH US dollar. They are going to want to just monitor ETH US dollar and make sure that it gets updated, say, every few hours, like, or Rye, for instance, who's looking to use us. They need it updated every 3 hours. They could just run this and then you could set a rule, for instance, that says like, if it's not updated within 2 hours, there's two ways to do it. You could either tip it, so you could tip it to where somebody else would mine it, or if you're staked, you could just submit it yourself, which might be cheaper than tipping it, because tipping, if you remember, half of it's burned. So it's actually more expensive to tip it than like you could just submit it yourself and get a little reward. So I see some projects potentially just being the reporter themselves, and they always know that if nobody updates the value and all of the reporters in the Tellor system go away, that's actually cool. I can be the reporter myself. And so we would want to be able to build some sort of way that you could do that in Telliot, to just have like, don't submit when it's profitable, submit when X scenario happens of the value isn't updated. Because I'm actually not submitting for profit. I'm submitting because I want to make this thing stay updated. Does that make sense? Yeah, so.
Yep. And you can take your own tip.
Yeah, you could just take your own tip. Well, so you burn half the tip. So you wouldn't want to take your own tip. You would rather just not tip. So that's like, we could actually see people who, like on Telliot X, theoretically, you can just submit for something even if there's no tip associated with it. So you can just keep updating the value all you want. You don't get any tip for it. You get like a small time-based reward, but you can see people just updating their own values for no way. Obviously, yeah. So those are kind of the various users that I see. Any other users we identify? Or people?
I think you could
Tellor
break
user,
down
right?
each of these three archetypes into subtypes, but I think that covers
Sure.
the main ones.
So if you think about who would, your initial goal was to have multiple clients. So these are really the only people that would bother creating multiple clients. So, I mean, another user would be Tellor. So of those four groups, those are probably our users, Tellor, and projects are the people that would be contributing and would really be the only potential source of multiple, multiple users or multiple clients. So I think one of the ways you can encourage multiple clients and useful testing is to just make sure it has to be architected really well with the components really well defined and the APIs between them so that people can then go in and not just create a whole new system, but just create replace component by component. I think that's might be the more likely scenario where a project might have some sort of a monitoring plugin, but still use a lot of the foundational components that we develop here.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's like, so, Mike Gann who's on Ricochet, he basically made a new Telliot X client for us, and he uses Airflow. Do you guys know that's AWS? So every 5 minutes it kicks off an AWS job that goes and pulls the ETH price and then submits it on chain, and that's basically a Telliot X client, and it's built in using AWS completely. So you can think of those kind of like out of the box solutions. It doesn't have to be this one specific program or programming language doing it. So yeah, and that's why I think like each of these may have different clients associated with them. But whenever I talk about multiple clients, what I mean is like I don't want you don't want every single person running one thing and then or using the exact same APIs, because then it's gonna, if they fail, everything fails. So
well, the APIs can be used to help define the tests too. So if people have different clients, they can test them.
Yeah, and I think like Crossy was mentioning it like last month, where we're just gonna pull out all of the sample APIs. We're not giving, whenever Tellor X comes out, like no reason that we need to give you any APIs. Go find them yourself. That way it sort of puts the onus on them, and hopefully they'll find different ones than everyone else.
I think that's
So, yeah.
I think there is one big issue with this new design. I'm not sure if you have thought about it, but there will be no failing transactions, almost no failing transactions, which means that it will be very easy to lose money. So basically, if you're a regular user, because this will be like a gas war, as soon as there is some profit, somebody will submit. But if you submit just like 5 seconds after that, and you will lose money because the transaction will not fail, but you will not get any reward. So I think a regular user is a regular user without like thinking about latency and having a good edge on things. It will be very, very easy to lose money.
Yeah,
so I'm thinking this might be one problem that will drive people away from submitting values.
well, I think we'll probably just use wrapper contracts. So like in smart contracts, it'll just be like a forwarding contract you could do. I mean, it may be hard for more of the casual users to do.
Yeah. So in the contract, you will specify what, if unless there is some reward, just fail the transaction.
Yeah, well, that's what people do with like the current blocks. So, if they don't want to submit for the 5th block, they just in there require that you're under the 5th block. Other than that, fail the transaction.
Yeah, this is one way of solving it, but getting it again, a regular user.
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah, I mean, you can build it into the client itself too, like
Right.
like flexible profit calculations.
But
No,
you
you
couldn't.
can't.
Why not?
Yeah.
Because in the client, you don't know what is the actual reward right now. I mean, you might think you know, but a second later, at the time you submit, there might be another transaction before yours, and both will pass, but the second transaction will not get any reward at all.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we could probably just write a sample. Well, I guess you would need to actually stake the smart contract. So yeah, I mean, it might be a tougher thing for smaller users to do, and they might get front run a bit, but I think.
And then also I tried Flashbot thinking I will have an edge, but it didn't work. Flashbots, Flashbots, they only pick up transaction where the profit for them is really high. If it's very close to what's the queue right now, the gas price is very close, they don't pick it up.
So, well, I think
the only solution I can think of is the one you mentioned, just using a proxy contract that checks whether there's any reward, otherwise it fails.
Yeah, I mean, I think MEV will slowly, hopefully the profit threshold will get a little lower. as just more people pick it up and people get used to it. But you know, ideally what, you know, like who are the power users going to be? Like, I think eventually, like game theoretical would say, like eventually the miners of Ethereum themselves are going to be the node providers here, because they'll just be, you know, they'll stake Tellor and then be the reporters because they can front run everyone and not pay gas. So once we hit that point, it's actually a cool point for Tellor as a project, but it's bad for most users. So
Actually, front running doesn't always work because they're like private chains. So you even if you don't use flash bots, you can still hide your transaction. So there is, but you're right. If that happens, that will be a good milestone.
yeah. But yeah, I guess we can think about how to sort of mitigate some of that. I think with the casual users more so, what you're going to see some of the pieces, I think some IDs are going to lend themselves more towards power users and some IDs are going to lend themselves more towards casual users. And then also if there are a lot of failing transactions, so say like every time the profit threshold gets certain high, then you have a whole bunch of people failing on a transaction or something like that, or not making money, that's an indication that we need to bump up the wait time. So you would, if you have a whole bunch of people staked and a whole bunch of people trying to submit for every single block, bump up that wait time, and either force less people to be submitting for each one. And
Would it make more sense then to start off with a more aggressive wait time, assuming we had a lot of interest right away?
Yeah, but I mean, you can't tell because like that's, you know, you don't know if it is going to be, if we're going to have a lot of interest or not. I mean, 12 hours is
Already
you know,
pretty long.
yeah, like we could potentially, by switching over to 12 hours, like freeze our whole system for 12 hours.
12 hours.
For a couple, for a day or so anyway.
There's a, yeah. As long as everyone on the team is running one, it'd be okay.
Well, you want to just make sure that people know, like, so like, I'll just make sure like us on the team, we can just be staked. And then like, if the miners all lock themselves out, then like, we can just manually submit for the IDs that get tipped or really need to be updated. And that'll be fine. But
so what's the gas usage right now on submit? Have you actually tried it? I just want to calculate
on submit value.
Yeah.
So you know the fifth block is currently like 2 million gas.
Yeah.
It's going down to like 200K.
So with the current prices, what, like 100, a little bit less than $100. I'll calculate it, yeah.
I don't know. But the other thing is it's also dependent on, so like the data that you can input in, each ID is going to be in bytes now. So theoretically, we're going to be increasing that number of bytes. So like it's 200K if it's, you know, a small number of bytes, but then you can pack a whole lot in there, and increase the cost per submission, which may be a bad thing or might be a good thing if you're getting more data for your, more bang for your buck. So anyway, questions, concerns, thoughts? Doing good.
Yeah, I mean, my overall concern is around the previous topic around, is this going to be viable for casual users right out the gate? Because I think if we don't, it's going to be something that we need to, initially, you want to have that big push to get people to participate and get that initial wave in. And
yeah, I mean, I think for casual users, what we'll probably just want to do is make pools for them. You know, just the more we can run, so we like stake your ETH here. Here's how you can help report.
Because yeah, pools are the way to get a casual user underneath the power user umbrella.
Yes,
you're trusting a power user to do all those things for you. Otherwise, we'd have to figure out a way to make the Telliot client somehow have these power user features built in. But you guys said that that's not.
Well, it's just always, I mean, anytime it's tough to, anytime you're in these competitive environments, usually like it'll be okay for the casual user right basically before power users get in, similar to how Tellor was right at the beginning. We had casual users be our miners, but it only lasts for about a month. and then you get sort of eaten alive by the power users. So
Yeah.
my guess
That's
is
that's a huge problem. It'd be amazing if somehow we could find a point of leverage there to solve that in our community.
The power users are like the big ships that turn slowly.
Yeah.
Like the big pools. Every time there was a change to the Tellor contract, there's always like a few days or a week where the power users haven't updated their stuff yet. So every time there's an update, there's an opportunity for casual users to just download Telliot off the GitHub and get some rewards. It's probably going to be the way it is for Telliot X too.
Yep. So
Cool. So we need to make that process super easy for them.
yeah. But I think just even having it online too makes it easy. Like having a web submitter via Tellor scan. I could build that in a day, and you could just stake with MetaMask and manually submit. What's the price of ETH? Go for it.
Yeah, but I think that there's a little bit more to it than that for a casual user. The system has some more parameters that the user just needs to be aware of, and the client should handle those incredibly smoothly. So you figure he has, at some point, he's going to open up the app and say, okay, there should be a red light or a green light. Am I allowed to submit? Yes or no? Is it my time to submit? Or, and then if I do submit, do I get an ETH failed transaction? Does a casual user even know what that failure means or why it happened? They just want to know, okay, I failed and I got paid, or I failed and I didn't, or I submitted and I got paid, or I submitted and it was too late. I missed the window. That's all they want to know. So that interface to the casual user has to be incredibly simple.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
And you might call that a power user feature, but I think it's just a simple UI that is needed.
I mean, would we want to add a nonce in to each ID? I mean, that we could potentially change the code still. I don't think that would be too difficult to do. And Tim and Tally and Brenda would probably be the people, but to prevent you.
Yeah, what does that do?
What?
Just like a counter. So like similar to like an ETH transaction. So that way we could get some failed transactions.
So how would that work? I still don't.
You could just say like, what's the number of submissions per, let's say 10, there's been 10 submissions per request ID 1. To submit the 11th, you have to type in 11 before your submission.
Ah, I see what you mean.
And
yeah,
then
that will work.
If somebody else typed in 11 already and beat you to it, you don't submit.
This is a very good way to mitigate it. Yes.
Yeah, I think that would mitigate it, right?
Yeah.
Do you understand, Tim?
Yeah, because I had been thinking about it as maybe something like Uniswap, like you want to exchange at least this amount. You want to get at least this minimum amount. But so like, as in putting in we want at least the reward to be 5, whatever. But yeah, the nonce would make it easier. It's just
yeah.
You mean to ensure that the reward is always more than the cost, but you can't guarantee this because you need to know the prices for ETH, you need to know the price for TRB, and that's.
Well, you could put in like a TRB amount to say like make sure that the tip plus the time-based reward is greater than 0.5 TRB.
Yeah, maybe you can use even both methods.
But yeah, I think the TRB one you could put as a wrapper, more so a wrapper contract. But I think just a nonce would probably work and be super simple, because I think we already keep track of the submissions per ID. So like you would just have to add it as an input and a require statement.
Yeah, I much prefer the nonce one.
Just from my understanding, what happens if we do implement the nonce? What happens if, say, the nonce is 11 and two reporters submit to the same mempool for the same block, and miners, Ethereum miners accept both? Would that be a problem?
You can't. So it's just transact. Somebody has to get placed first in the block. So
right. So someone will get a reversion.
Yep.
Okay.
And failing transactions is another way to continue using Flashbot, because Flashbot doesn't allow you to have failing transactions. So that's another way of mitigating it.
Yeah. Just I wonder, like, if you're a casual user and you may have to get like a little bit of well, I guess it would only take 10 seconds, but you may have to just like wait a little bit and pay attention to the app to get a message back if you have two nonces submitted to the same block, versus like if so imagine like if two people submit 11 and one person waits 10 seconds for the failure, versus like the nonce is already something like 13 and you submit 11, you'll get instant failure.
Yeah, but the reason that you would want to add it is like if you both, in the way it would currently work, if you both submit
Yeah.
for nonce 11, both of them are going to go through. Somebody just gets the reward, the other person doesn't get anything.
Yeah.
So you just wasted gas and you don't get any reward.
Yeah,
And
the
you have
nonce
to
is
wait
a very
another
good
12 hours.
solution.
That's
Right. No, I agree. I guess I'm just saying that might just be like user experience like caveat, but something that can be like easily.
I mean, I would just say like it just handles it, it keeps track, and you would just be able to query, kind of just keep updating
Definitely.
if you're allowed to submit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you even want to allow a 0 nonce so someone can just not use a nonce if they don't want to?
Mm,
Or would that even make sense? And it would just automatically become nonce number 11.
Yeah, but why would you ever
want?
wanna
Why
do
would you
that?
want to? Yeah. Why would
Yeah.
you want to do that?
I don't know. I guess like if
but it's feature that they don't get a reward.
yeah, I guess if you're using something that doesn't keep track of the nonce, I don't know, just like simplifying whatever, that would
But the-
simplify whatever interface someone's using, but also it would complicate.
But I think you
It
can just keep
requires
track of,
payment.
yeah, like similar, I think it would eventually just work like you would build it into the software, kind of like MetaMask does for you. You don't have to manually enter your nonce. It sort of
Right.
enters it for you.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Whatever you're interacting with already is reading the network, the chain. So yeah, okay. That makes sense.
Okay. So,
Tim, do you want to add that as an issue along with the constructor thing?
Sure, yeah.
yeah, you're just gonna have to change like every test. Control H. It's like,
Oh yeah, right.
So yeah, because you're gonna have to like find the previous nonce. Yeah, it's just gonna be like, that's like one of those changes that's like one line of code but breaks every test out there. So have fun, Tim.
Okay, so now
I know what I'll
this
be-
solution, the casual user will automatically submit with some nonce generated by the client, and it'll pass or it'll fail. And if it fails, the failure error would be something like "you're too late." Something
Yeah, wrong nonce.
understandable. Wrong
But at
nonce
least
is not-
instead
not
of losing like
for the user.
$50, you will lose like $5. It's a big difference.
But if the user's interface is to go look at the contract and look at the failure code, wrong nonce is not that useful to a casual user. So
Yeah.
too late or something.
Mhm.
If again, depends on what the UI is. If the client detects that failed transaction and presents something useful to the casual user, that's another option.
Yeah, no, I definitely think we
But
should.
believe me, I read so many wrong nonce error messages that I had absolutely no clue what it was trying to tell me.
Undervalue
Start now.
nonce, incorrect transaction, and
I
you're
like
just
Googling nonce. That was a nonce.
Yeah.
Incorrect nonce for current value is what it says on Telliot.
yeah, we can make readable error messages. I think that's definitely on the the docket for sure. But okay, on to, I guess, specs for the actual system and what it has to do. Or unless anyone wants to keep talking, it is really good. So, okay, so kind of like we were talking, so there's going to be in Telliot X, there's a big difference because you don't have to submit for all the IDs. So, we basically there's two pieces. So we'll draw like an Excel spreadsheet for the database. So there's like the database, and then there's like this thing that submits it over to Ethereum. Yeah, so he pulls from the database and submits the value. So we're gonna need, basically the way that all the code should work is probably similar. I liked kind of the modularity we were starting to build with Telliot. You have something that keeps track and stores all of your values, and then you have another thing that monitors the chain, stores values, and then figures out when to submit. So whenever you're allowed, it goes and grabs the current values and submits. And yeah, the reason that you would sort of want to have a database kind of running is so you don't have to then go, once you're allowed to submit, you don't want to have to then go query APIs and then go figure out what the gas is, because that's going to potentially slow you down and you're going to miss out on any sort of reward. So you want to have kind of the database ready to go with current variables humming, and then you'll be able to submit it. It's a relatively simple structure, but it's like complex as far as I know. A lot of people who are working on like the Pi signer or have worked on Telliot, the submission, obviously there's a whole bunch of things that can go wrong with the submission and the errors and the handling of the messages and when you're supposed to submit and the profit. And then on the database side, so these two pieces should be sort of interchangeable. So you should be able to have, like, we'll have to write out specs for the database as far as like, I'm thinking we use like a SQL database, something that's easy to read. I would say that that was like a big current problem with the current Telliot. It's that, everyone would be like, what value am I storing right now for ample? Like, it was like, well, I guess let me test it on a ring and submit it. And then I'll see. And that was basically the way that everyone was testing it. If you just had like would look, because like it's going to be a lot easier, because what I'm guessing is most people won't be pulling for all IDs. It could just be, a handful of IDs that you're actually submitting values for are the ones that are going to be getting tips. So you'll just be, you only have an Excel spreadsheet or a SQL database with 10, 20 values, unless you're a really big power user or until we get some other types of IDs coming in. So yeah, and then, so there's going to be database tests. So this is the database. But like we'll use SQL, but we should be able to have the connection work. Like it should sort of be able to be almost like an interface type thing. So where you could plug in your own database if you would want. Or SQL, there could be a hosted database, meaning like somebody could just run one and people can grab values from there. Similar like now, if you're running one, like this is what we had in the past, where you could just run one database and all of your miners could connect to the one database. So you would host it. But in the long run, we could even do a peer-to-peer database, to where you host it and then you share your values with other people and sort of get some censorship resistant API calls. That would be super cool. Obviously, it's something you can hopefully sort of just build upon. But we want to think about that while we're building it out, and make it modular. So, and then as far as, I think that sort of goes in with the database. Like we can see, obviously, all the pieces that you would need to store, every piece that has to be related. There's kind of two values that you would need to store. So there's like the data, but then there's also like chain info. So like when can you submit? What's the gas price? What's the current nonce? Those will be like specific to your miner, but then the data won't be.
So Nick, what if we separated out the pricing database?
Yep.
And we had a separate function called the chain monitor. And that,
yeah, so you had almost two separate databases.
That way, you really only need one a blockchain monitor and one database, and you can have many submitters. All the submitters don't need all that monitoring
Yep.
logic.
Yeah, so. Exactly, no, that's exactly what you would want to do. So separate these out or,
I mean, you would be nice to have that's one thing I've, as a casual user, you'd like just to be able to look at the Telliot blockchain, see what's happened, what's happening now, just like, what do you call it? The website did before.
Or scan.
Tellor scan, yeah. So that should be part of the client, I think.
sure,
A version of it, which all it does is just give you the state of the chain
Mhm.
and monitor it.
so you're talking about like, this would be like the GUI on top of,
Not necessarily, it is just a blockchain monitor, which goes and gets the relevant pieces of information and stores the current state, maybe stores the price history that's in it.
yep,
The status of it, whether or not something's ready for a submission. Basically, it's similar to Tellor scan, but casual user is going to need one. It may not be, it may just be one window of a UI.
sure. Okay.
Cool.
Yeah, no, I think that sounds good. The next piece, so I forgot there's this other piece here. So there should be two other pieces that you can run. So you should be able to kick off just the database and pull, start storing data in your thing. That should be something that your computer should be able to do. And then there should be two other ones. You should be able to run the submitter. And this submits values to the chain that you want to submit to. I think that's the biggest piece, is it has to be multi-chain. We're probably going to go to Polygon very, very quickly with Telliot X, if not other chains as well. We're going to be an ETH and RinkB. So basically it should be able to work plug and play with any EVM chain. And we need to make sure of that. So other chains, I don't think we need to necessarily build in right away. I would say just keep them to the EVM compatible chains, but eventually maybe even, eventually you could have you could actually just build another submitter for a non-EVM chain and just plug it in. And hopefully that would work as well. But, we can think the fellowship stuff could be sort of handled with this as well. All right. And then the other piece down here, I'll just mention it since before I forget, the disputer, you should be able to run right now we built that previously into Telliot, and then it sort of got defunct and never maintained. But you should be able to run some sort of monitor that says it checks on chain and it checks the database that you're running. Are these good values? Do I want to dispute them and make money? This could be for the casual user. This could be for just us. It's tough to say who it is, because dispute fees, you can lose your dispute fee. If we're hoping that we're going to get to a minimum dispute fee, which is just going to be 15 TRB. But even submitting 15 TRB as a dispute fee, it's not cheap if you're going to lose it and it's going to break. So we have to make sure that this thing sort of works really well and checks, but it'll have to be manual. So because there's, as we've kind of been talking about recently, what is a bad value? It should be pretty manual, but there should be something you should be able to run that warns you and says maybe this is an opportunity, go look at it. Because on Ample, if a value is 10% off of the other values on Ample, that's probably a disputable value. If it's, if it's 2% off the value on ETH, probably not that big of a deal. There's probably an ETH API somewhere pulling 2% lower. So it's always
Not worth the risk to try to dispute that, because then you have
Right.
to count on the rest of the community agreeing with you.
Yep. luckily in Tellor X, we have like an invalid option for the disputes. So like if there's just like some error, but ideally, yeah, you just want to be careful and we want to make it very, very user input. So that way, like, sorry, we're not in charge of what you setting these really tight thresholds on the dispute stuff.
Are you thinking to put this in the spec? What's the threshold for a dispute to be rejected or accepted?
You can't, I don't want to put that in the spec because you can't, you know, because it depends
So
on
how can you decide whether a value is disputable?
it's really tough because I mean, it all depends on like the volatility in a given day. You know, like if the ETH price goes down by 50% in a given day, you know,
No, I mean, okay, so for ETH, there's a 10% difference. Should you open a dispute or not? How would you decide?
it depends. I mean, was like, let's say the value has been completely stable for the whole day at $3,000 and you submitted it at 10% lower. Yeah, like you can probably open up a dispute. If the volatility is all over the place within the last 10 minutes, and maybe there's a chance that on some exchange it was $2,700, like it might be good. So,
well, I think whatever you decide, you should definitely be put in the spec, because otherwise, I mean,
yeah,
as a disputer, you will be always concerned, is it going to be accepted or not, unless it's documented somewhere. What's the deviation from the actual price? Then
well, I think I don't know if there's going to be ever a time that you can make that call, because like I think another good example that we would want to do would be like, let's say somebody's submitting ample values, but they're always submitting them 2% lower than what ample is. Is that good? I mean,
if you put it in the spec, then problem solved. If you put like no more than 5% deviation.
no, but I would dispute them if they were 2% consistently lower. I'd probably warn them first. But I would say, like,
it's an
cases.
unspecable, it's a subjective thing.
Yeah,
You
it
can't
has to
spec
be
a
subjective.
thing. But can you spec out a warning, which is just like, you could call it a volatility warning, where all these prices
Maybe.
are flagged yellow? It just says, hey, these are worth your attention.
I
Yeah,
think that makes a lot of sense. Like, especially, maybe it seems to me like it's a discussion of like, should disputing be like algorithmically vigilant or like human vigilant? But like, for sure, like maybe like we do want to avoid algorithmic, like just
You can have
automatic
algorithmic
disputing
warnings
because
and
it's
then
touching,
human.
but yeah, algorithmic warning sounds like a great like middle ground.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's the issue of having it inside the spec, like having it hard coded? I don't understand why you don't want to put it in the spec.
Really volatile market days would make it hard.
Or you can put in the spec if it's a volatile market, then it's like an exception.
Yeah, no, I would just try and avoid it, because you also don't want to give people like a leeway when it comes to what is a good value or a bad value. Because like if people are actually using the values, what you don't want to say is, listen, as long as you're within 5%, we're not going to dispute you. Because then that means, let's say there's an instance where like they want to push the price down by 5% on some derivative contract. That means they could.
Well, you can also put in the spec if you're like 5%, but for like more than an hour is still disputable. These are like additional cases.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say like everything's disputable. Like, don't be a dick. Like that would be like,
okay,
I would
but
just say, like,
somebody,
listen,
but somebody monitoring the
system.
system, they want to open disputes only when it makes sense.
Yeah, I think the only
How would you know
way
when it makes sense?
I think it's all subjective. Like I think the only way it would actually completely make sense would be like if it's like just a completely wrong value. Like, you know, the few times that we've had in our system where somebody submits 0, like it's like go for it, like it's a race. But other than that, I mean, it should be subjective.
You have to feel confident you can make the case to the community.
Yeah.
Right. So what happens if we had a spec for it and somebody disputed based on the spec, and then the community deviated from the spec because they got some time to think about it and there was some nuance there?
Yeah.
Well, this one can be voted invalid. I mean, all of these like nuances, they can be voted invalid, but I really want to see something more specific for like, is it 10% a good value to dispute? Is it 5%? Is it 20%? Something more strict, but obviously the small nuances, they can be all voted invalid and nobody is angry about.
I think maybe over time we can add them. I
I really understand the desire to want that. That would be a great
Yeah, I
idea.
get it.
Because otherwise, I mean, I might monitor the system, but if there is even the slightest chance that I will lose the dispute fee, I would never open a dispute.
Yeah. No, I don't know.
I mean, obviously, I wouldn't open disputes for like values that are only like 2 or 3 or 5% off, but 10%, is this good enough for a dispute? Something like really, really good cases for when to open a dispute, not the nuances, obviously, just the good cases. Like,
yeah, no, I think we can at least come up with some examples.
Yeah, you could. The community could. It'd be open source. Someone's going to come up with something and hopefully open source it.
Yeah.
And you might have a few different algorithms out there for people to adopt if they at their own risk.
Because I mean, I would say like, I would just give examples. I would be hesitant about putting specific percentage values on a given API because I think that would lead to the wrong image. But I think just specking out examples would definitely work.
Yeah.
but isn't this what Ampleforth were pushing? They were pushing like no more than 5%, and they said we don't want prices too much different.
I don't know what they
the
want.
actual project. The actual projects might be pushing for something more strict. I'm thinking
Yeah.
about the other side, people
also
wanting
makes
to use
sense,
the
yeah.
value.
Yeah, so like Ampleforth,
Well, the
that's
exact
like,
value.
yeah, I mean, Ampleforth still has some issues though, because they like, you know, that's
No,
something.
I don't mean them in particular, but imagine
Yeah.
you're a project, you
General.
want to be we have more confidence in the Oracle.
Yep.
And why
Couldn't that
one way to
project-
be more confident?
Couldn't that project make their own disputer and
Yeah.
encourage people to run it
Yeah.
so that it meets their guidelines?
No, the problem is not the dispute. It's not a disputer, but it's when to open disputes. Like even if you run your own disputer, you don't want to be opening disputes right and left if you're going to lose your the
Yeah, but a
dispute
particular
fee.
project knows what they care about, so they could decide, they could code up when they think that value should be disputed.
It
Yeah.
could determine the.
And the community would probably support the project.
Yeah.
So do you mean that the project will specify when a value is disputable?
Yeah, like maybe if Ampleforth has particular requirements on submissions, they could dispute whatever they think doesn't meet their requirements.
No, but don't forget, if you dispute, you might lose the fee. So at the moment, it's like very,
We're
very
giving the
close to
project
the-
the flexibility to do that or not. Right? The project can choose
Yeah, I agree.
to do that or not. They can choose to have very loose requirements, which doesn't result in many lost disputes, or they can choose to make it very tight, in which case they might occasionally lose a dispute, but it keeps the submissions in line with what they're looking for.
In
Yeah.
theory, you're right, but in practice, if you're a project that wants to use this value, you don't necessarily want to be thinking about all of this. You just want to be thinking about an oracle you want to rely on.
Well, it gives them some power to protect themselves and protect their data. That, you know, you could imagine they would at least want to subsidize the opportunity to dispute.
Yeah, I think it's tough because like we want to be less like paternalistic over like the software that we put out and like how people use the system, but like it really does come at that cost of like if we accept like less if we do less nannying, then other people who use the system have to take on more responsibility. And I think for this case, that's like speaking to like if we're not watching disputes and like hard coding that into the client, and like the user of the Oracle data is going to have to do that, and we're just not sure if like that's something that's realistic, but something to consider.
Yeah.
Hey guys, I have to run. I have a meeting coming up in a couple minutes, but
Okay.
so
Mike.
yeah, just last couple comments were yeah, I like the disputer. Two other tests the one I suggested previously would be a monitor function. And then the other one might be a voter function. I know that the disputer is currently the voter, currently used as the voter. If that's the case, think about renaming it, because just from a a casual user module is very specific and non-DAO voter-like. So maybe we want to have a separate module for voters called the voter. So, but that's all. But it looks great. It'll be fun.
Cool. We'll pass forward. So yeah, I mean, I think we should all be wrapping up soon because we actually have the community call in like 20 minutes.
I have one 11:45, so.
Yeah, I mean, wrapping it up, like, I think we have, so we'll be working, I'll make a new repo for Telliot. I think we're gonna be building the new Telliot X, or one of the many clients, hopefully, in Python. Owen will be kind of leading this piece up, and all of you guys will be helping him, I know. But this is kind of the specs that we're gonna be working on. And yeah, definitely just, we'll be following the code, and we can kind of reach out as far as the next steps go. I think there will be, the question would be, do we want to, how sort of modular do we want to make these? Do we want to put them in, you know, how can we make it more modular from the initial get-go as far as architecture goes, and how can we from day one start kind of the good practices of testing and creating good open source software that's documented and that everybody can sort of look at and contribute to. So yeah,
Awesome.
I had
yeah,
another question about Crossy's point.
go for it.
So just, I mean, it just keeps coming back to me in terms of like how this fits into the overall strategy and like the different ideal users that we have. Because I mean, Crossy is basically like a power user, right? And like what is the end, what is like the end goal if this is like an issue for people that like when the dispute is not clear, how does that affect the end game? You know what I mean? Like, are we which user like are we losing because of that? You know what I mean?
It's just, yeah, I think it's just, we'll have less people willing to dispute, but we'll still have plenty of power users that have a ton of money and have a more sophisticated system running.
Yeah, well, I think it's going to
I
be,
think the main issue is less confidence in the values, to be honest, because projects wanting to use the values, they want to have confidence, and having a good dispute system gives you more confidence. I think this is otherwise losing whoever is going to submit is not that important. Well, it is important, but it's more important on actual users wanting to use the values.
Yeah.
More confidence.
when
That
I think,
goes back to,
sorry.
and that goes back to whether or not, you know, you guys were saying in the beginning, you want to just remove all the APIs and people have to provide that on their own. If we do that, then it's like, okay, well, where do the specs go for like the minimum tolerance, the maximum tolerance for disputing?
You have to make them wider, of course.
But it's a trade-off.
Yeah,
You have, you know, hopefully you guarantee more sources of data in the centralization in terms of the APIs that we're using.
I think one thing we want to avoid with the dispute thresholds, right, is we don't want people to be aggressively disputing for profit on the Tellor network.
well, I think it's, I think it, yeah. But I think we've also done a few things in the code to sort of mitigate some of it. So the invalid option. So I think after a few rounds of voting in this, like if people see like, hey, if you dispute and it's close and we just say it's invalid, that'll actually be a positive thing for the network. And then the other thing too is, so I'm guessing the number of reporters is going to skyrocket with this. It like has to whenever we have that. So the dispute fee is going to come way down. So right now it's like 400. It's going to go down to like 15 TRB probably. So that's, if A, you're only putting up 15 TRB, and B, there's a good chance it's going to be invalid. I think those things in general are going to make it a lot, people are going to be a lot more likely to dispute, which will be good. So, you know, and I think you can even handle it, maybe even potentially in the future, lowering the dispute fee farther to where like, hey, just boot it off chain and, you know, we'll deal with it later. And that'll be like good things and making sure that runs smoothly. But yeah, we definitely want to make sure that it's, because you want to make sure that it's going to be a tough balance, making sure that A, you have the specs really tight so everybody knows exactly what the value is going to be. But then, you know, like a really good example would be like, this goes back into like what users actually want from the specific values. If you want a completely uncensorable value, especially when it comes to a price, a lot of times you have to take more of a wide range. So, like if you wanted a specific ETH price, if you want the specific ETH price from Coinbase, the problem with that is that now Coinbase can censor your API and censor what value you're getting on chain. So they could get in the way of it. If you just want the ETH price, well, okay, that's what's a valid ETH price. And now is it the one on Uniswap? Is it the one on Coinbase, on Binance, on the Laxi? Like maybe, like you don't know. So you have to have a nice wide range for all of the spreads to fit in.
And with removing the APIs from the index, I mean, what we call indexes now, like if you remove those APIs, could we have like the community could still have like a suggested APIs list or something like that? Like, I mean,
yeah, but I'm not touching it.
right.
Community, yes, the community can come up with all this on their own.
Go for it,
We can
guys.
Encourage it. We could fund it, but it shouldn't come from us. But this
Yeah.
goes back into
Well, nobody's going to know
branding
what
type
to
of
use.
data, like Nick was saying. What he was getting at is like we got to sell people on the sort of the brand of our data being cryptofied. And when you cryptify something, it's going to be, the latency is going to be greater, it's going to be more expensive, but it's also going to be more decentralized and more censorship resistant. And
I still can't.
Case for why that's good.
I still can't figure out how to like go to an API website and figure out what to pull like with the API. I can't.
Sure.
I'm still working on that.
We'll have API class for
Anyway,
Spark.
adding the invalid option for disputes gives you a way to experiment and just see what works
Yep.
and what not. Because obviously, having an invalid dispute, nobody is going to be angry about losing a stake or losing the fee.
Yeah, that's a big important change.
It gives you the freedom to experiment with all of these thresholds.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, all right, guys. Well, this was super helpful. I think we have a lot to go off of here. We're going to continue to build it. So we'll probably, maybe in like 2 weeks, we can have another Telliot call and see how the progress is going and what we're building and what kind of things that we're running into. So thanks everyone for coming. Some of you guys I'll see in, you can stop recording, Ryan. But